Is your favorite group now a zombie band? No, we're not talking about the psychedelic pop group from the 60s. Stay with us to find out.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Great episodes always behind us and always ahead of us, Eric, right? We know what the past has been. We know the future is going to be just as great.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And tonight we have a really interesting topic, thanks to our recurring guest, Chris Clark.
He just keeps
right?
sending us. He just keeps feeding us material. Christopher Clark, how are you?
Good. And this is one that even before the article I sent you, is one I've been thinking about a long time. Just you see and it's one that comes up a bunch. So I thought this would really be a good.
And more so, even more prevalent as the years go on, it's going to become more and more of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to get into zombie bands and what they are. But so we're not really going to be speaking about tonight. We're not going to be talking about an album or a particular movie. We're just going to be kind of talking about this, bouncing off of this article in Rolling Stone magazine, which we will link into the show notes for you to read. That really kind of started this conversation. Like Chris said, it's something that's been kicking around for a while. What is a zombie band? And we'll get into it. And I thought it would be a great discussion because as artists get older or decide to retire or pass away, sometimes the band doesn't pass away with them or doesn't retire with them. So what we're talking about when we talk about a zombie band at its purest definition is basically a band that is touring out on the road, a popular band, but that have no original members in them. And then, and even to take that statement one step further, Eric, maybe a band that has no original touring members, but then also no members that were popular as replacements also. Right?
Yeah.
That this is really just a literally an assemblage of people that do not record. They never appeared on any albums, or maybe they did, but they were later in the game. But as a touring entity, there's nobody left, which essentially makes the band a zombie. They're living, but they're not really alive, right?
Yeah, we've always talked about our favorite bands, and perhaps we might be a little bit biased in the sense that we want these original members to be it's not Queen without Freddie Mercury, it's not Fleetwood Mac without Lindsey Buckingham, and this kind of thing. And this is happening quite a lot, even though there are surviving members, and sometimes they're using perhaps session players or players that they've known, they've used on albums before, perhaps, or whatever. But it's just, I feel, to start with, I think, in my humble opinion, especially nowadays, that because live bands is their meal ticket right now. I mean, you see all these old legacy artists selling their catalog to get money, right? That's the only way they can make their their living, is that so they're selling songs, they're selling their entire body of work, for which is mind blowing. And then you come to these bands that when people die and such, they're carrying on legacy, they're carrying on And somebody raised an interesting point. I think it was our friend Andy who said, "Would you rather see a band that sounds great, that are doing all of these great songs that you want to hear, or would you rather see your favorite artist older and him or her not kind of losing their luster, as it were,
a little long
in the tooth? They don't sound half as good as they used to." That raises an interesting point as well. So there's I think nowadays, in my opinion, I think it's more about the music, and I think it's about the talent. I think there are certain members of bands that have actually surpassed original members, in original lineups and things, but because we might be a little bit biased and say, hey, we like this band back then or back when these guys were in the band, these guys, perhaps maybe we're not giving them full credit. Maybe we're not giving them full chance. Right. So, but they might be just as talented, if not more, because they're hungry and they're young and they're, they want to get out there. Yeah. So it's basically it just comes down to a name at this point.
It does. And before I hand it over to Chris, I think there's a couple of questions I want to put out there for us. So we kind of have some guides. And if you're listening, hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and let us know what your opinion is on this too, because I think that's going to be an important part. But I think some of the things we want to talk about is how many members, right? Is there a percentage that needs to exist for a band to not be a zombie band? Does it come down to a percentage of members, right? That's one theory, one thing.
Right.
Does the general, another question is, does the public in general really care? Do they really know if they go see Foreigner that it's not Lou Gramm, and he's not there? That's another thought to think about. And then another thing to think about is at what point does this then become, what's the difference between going to see a zombie band or just a really good tribute band?
Yeah.
Aside from because you're talking, if let's just use Foreigner as an example, because that was one of the notable ones, right? Chris, in the article absolutely. Is Foreigner has no members left as of, I think, last year, because Mick Jones was the founding member and guitarist and songwriter, and he decided to stop touring, right? So there's virtually no quote unquote original members of the band. Lou Gramm left years ago, has been replaced. So right now, Foreigner is a sanctioned, authorized entity by Foreigner Corporation or whatever, but there's no one there that ever can claim any connection to any of the hits, Chris.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the struggle I have with this is like, first of all, I feel like really Eddie Trunk, who's a DJ that is on 104.3 and on XM, he says really all promoters care about is that they could put that name on the marquee. And sometimes I feel like the thing that I struggle with zombie bands is like some of them, it's context. Like, how are they presenting it? Like, I don't feel like Foreigner ever made any pretend, Mick Jones never really hid the fact that this isn't the guys who recorded Four or, Double Vision. Like, you knew, like, if you're going in, if you pay attention, you know what you're getting. But then you get bands like, Jerry Shirley, the drummer from Humble Pie, is still going out with Humble Pie without, Steve Marriott or Peter Frampton or anybody that ever mattered. Like, and that's an inferior product. Whereas Foreigner, I don't know that it's an inferior product because he's got really great players playing in that band. And then, so that's where I struggle with it. And then which zombie bands are legitimate and which aren't. Like, technically Steve Harris is the only guy left in Iron Maiden, but I guess what doesn't make them a zombie band is that he, he's the only member from when they first came out. Like, from the records, there's still people there. So that's not really.
Who's the lead vocalist for Iron Maiden currently?
Bruce Dickinson, who's been with them since the third record.
And he basically, I mean, he's the voice. So he's the voice of Maiden.
So I guess that's what constitutes the zombie band, is like where they're not from the classic records that have been recorded, I guess, right? So
I mean, or is it a percentage of members, right? Because you just said that Humble Pie, you mentioned two other members. So even though the drummer is the one taking the name out on the road, he represents a third of the band. He represents 33%.
Well, more than 30
of the band.
Less than 33. I mean, there was like a 4 or 5 member band. So then that's the other thing. Like, to me, but like, is he the one member that really matters? Like, if you don't have Steve Marriott singing, does that really matter? Or like the Guess Who? Like, what was it? Like the drummer? Like, does it? If you don't have
let's get into that.
If you don't have Burton Cummings,
and Randy Bachman. So let's talk about that, because that was kind of a big to do about that. And it was a big story about the Guess Who, which kind of encapsulates some of this whole thing, is that, the Guess Who is known for Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings, right? They're the two kind of, they're the Townsend and Daltrey of the Guess Who. They're the, Burton Cummings is the voice of it, and Randy Bachman is the guitar and all that stuff. They do not currently tour as the Guess Who. They do their own thing. But original members, two original members, Jim Cale and Gary Peterson, they're original members. They tour as the Guess Who. Okay? The problem was, or the problem is that they didn't sing or write any of the songs.
Yeah.
And in their promotions, when they promote these tours, they give the impression that Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman are there.
Right.
Okay. So Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings, more so Burton Cummings, they filed a lawsuit and said, listen, you're kind of giving people the impression that it's, the classic lineup of the Guess Who, and it's not. And those two guys said, well, we have every right to tour. We have every right to make a buck. We're members of the Guess Who. We're original members. Why can't we? So Burton Cummings actually decided to cut his nose off to spite his face, and it paid off. What he did, and Randy Bachman also, is they terminated Burton Cummings terminated his public performance license agreements, which means he terminated all agreements with anybody that was currently licensing Guess Who songs. He said, no one's going to make any money off this. So basically what he tried to do is starve the group by taking away their ability to perform Guess Who songs. He's in turn not making any money from it, but he said, I need to do this because people need to understand what's going on with this. That makes sense. So in a way he gambled and said, well, I could just sit back and make the money on this, but they're promoting it as something it's not, right? And that's where we get into is it a percentage of members? Eventually, so what that did is effectively that pinched off the Guess Who they had to cancel they had to cancel their tour. Like we can't pay the license for the songs so we can play them and then give them royalties. Wow. And then they did come to an agreement, Chris.
I mean, for me, like I keep saying, like I keep coming back to this, and this is the thing I keep thinking about is like context. Like, and I had this conversation with my brother today because he's a huge Linkin Park fan. And so Chester Bennington is coming back. They just came back, and obviously Chester Bennington is no longer with us. And a lot of those songs are very personal. Like if you read their lyrics, they read like a diary. And they put this woman in who is associated with Scientology, and Scientology is very controversial with their feelings about psychology and stuff. And, and he would, very, 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 the polar opposite of like Chester's point of view on that stuff. The original guitar player is not touring with them. I think the drummer's not touring with them.
He just stepped away recently, right? He was in, then he decided to.
So for me, it's context of like, how are you trying to sell this? And then on the flip side, you have Pantera, where the Abbott brothers are dead, and they were like the founding members of the band, and like really the heart and soul of that group, right? So now you have two original members and two friends who are people who are friends of the Abbotts out touring, but they're full on saying this is a tribute to Vinny and Dimebag Darrell. So to me, it's like, and it always comes back to, are you putting out a quality product, and are you trying to smoke something past the public? Because to me, I don't think it's so much how many members are in the band, but are they members that are an essential part of what makes that band that band? Like even Roger Daltrey, when he went out on his own, Townsend said, you can use the name The Who, and he didn't. He put out an album, Daltrey sings Townsend, and Daltrey sings Townsend in the songs of The Who. Like, so if Roger Daltrey, who's the voice of some of the most unbelievable rock and roll ever recorded, won't call it The Who without Pete Townsend, how can you call it, the Guess Who without Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings, who wrote some of those classic songs from the 60s that, even my kids know now, and you're trying to make it appear like, they're still there. So like, to me, it's not so much how many members are there, it's which members are there and in which context are they presenting this product to the public. Like, that's how I look at it.
That's correct. Yeah.
But I guess then, right. Eric, what you start doing then, but to Chris's point, is that now you're starting to assign value to people. So are we saying that the drummer and the bassist are, they didn't write any songs, and I'm asking, we're ascribing a value system to these people now.
Yeah.
Like, well, you were there throughout all the hits. You did all the touring back in the days. You left your family to go on the road, and now you're not really that important.
You get their, you kind of get their point. You kind of half agree with what they're saying, but the contributions to, when we've talked about this many times, is the contributions of band members.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they did not write the lyrics, they did not write the tunes, but the contribution of the musicality, like the Who would not be the Who for me without Entwistle and Moon. The fact that Townsend and Daltrey tour as the Who, because it's Pete Townsend. I mean, yeah, he's got every right to do so because he wrote every song practically. So, but for me, that's not quite the same band.
So is it a percentage for you then, or does it have to be a full? Like when I saw the Who,
it's like
I saw them with John Entwistle, so that was 75% of the Who.
75%. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but for me.
For you, what is it? What is it? For
me, I don't know. Having what was the Who was a 4-member band, and now it's practically an army of musicians behind them, sort of large, making the sound larger. And I get talent, but I still think that it should be out of respect for John, for Entwistle and Moon, that Pete Townsend. I wish he would just promote it differently. Like to Chris's point, it all depends on the artist and what they're doing. But I think, because Townsend himself said, he goes, I have this love-hate relationship with the Who. Mm-hmm. There are times where I love the band, and there are times where I just can't stand being in a rock band called the Who. And yet he's touring, and it's like, so what is it? Is it the money?
Yeah.
Is it why are you doing this, and why are you doing it this way, building upon something that should be just another 4-piece? But you want to make Quadrophenia sound that much bigger because it requires an orchestra at this point and everything. So I don't know. But then you got some people like the Allman Brothers Band, right? Where the legacy of that band has always been members come and go, but there's a brotherhood. There's a relationship there. And they pretty much finished their legacy, again, in my humble opinion, with musicians that were actually that exceeded the talent that they had for many years, that they weren't really doing things that great. They were, the drugs and all that. But they finished on a high with younger members and that kind of thing. So it's a tough call. I mean, it really kind of, depends on the situation, the band, the personalities involved. Right now,
the band right there is Asia. I mean,
yeah,
Jeff Downs is the only person left, and he was not the lead vocalist. He's certainly not Carl Palmer. He's keeping it going. But people say, here's the thing, I guess, are we being too harsh on this? Does the general public really care, or do they just want to go out and go to a show and hear these songs?
I think that was what the point I was trying to make when I my remarks in the first when I first spoke is yes, I think people don't care at this point, because we're talking about songs that are now 40, 50 years young at this point, when these artists back in the day were performing songs by blues artists or jazz artists that were from the 30s and the 40s. And in that time, it didn't matter who wrote the song. We never knew who the songwriters were at that point, but there were all these blues artists covering each other's songs, and they were, performing this stuff on the road and, the circuits and all that kind of thing. People became familiar with the music. It wasn't, and didn't matter who was who at that point until, we started seeing these prestige players start coming in and really taking it to that next level. Unfortunately, there's very, few of those kinds of people. I think they're harder to find today. We have a lot of young talent out there that's just, but they're not, we don't see the Stevie Ray Vaughns or you know what I mean? They're not as they don't seem to be as big. Perhaps maybe it's just they're doing it on purpose. Maybe they're flying under the radar, whatever it is, but they have the talent to back it up. You know what I mean? So that's just, I think it's just a matter of people wanting to hear the songs that they love at this point.
I mean, Gene Simmons kind of said it before the Kiss did the whole Avatars thing, before they announced that a few years ago. I remember reading an interview with Gene Simmons or hearing it, and he says, I don't see any reason why when we retire that Kiss can't go on because the characters will live on, meaning we could put people in the makeup.
Yeah.
And you can still go see a Kiss show. Now there's something to that, and maybe that might be the exception to the rule, because people go see the characters, right? They go to see the Demon, they go to see Ace, they go to see the Cat, which is what they did with Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. They took them out of the costumes and they put other people in the makeup. They didn't go do new makeup. So there might be something to see. Gene Simmons was kind of thinking about that down the road of when we're old and tired, there's no reason that Kiss can't live on, Chris.
And to me, that's the problem I had with that as a fan. Like, I am a really, despite all my love of Prague, I grew up a really, really big Kiss fan. And as somebody who, saw that band as his first concert and saw the original four as his first concert, it wasn't so much that Ace and Peter left the band, because I know Ace is a mess and Peter is, a hothead and all that stuff. You want to leave the band, that's fine. And even so much if you want to put other players in the same makeup, that's fine. It's the fact that they tried to sneak it past the public. Like they made it seem like it was still the same four guys wearing the same four makeup. Like I feel like they bullshitted the public, and that's the part that bothered me more than anything else. Like, I get that you want to still put that product out there. I get that that's what people want to see. That's fine. But it's the context of it. It's that I feel like you're trying to trick the audience the same way some of these.
So if they weren't, right? So Kiss is broken up, and if they came back in 3 years and said, okay, this is Kiss, we are authorizing it here. We found the best players that can replicate the Kiss experience, and they have our full blessing, and this is the Kiss experience that you were used to. Mm-hmm. How would you feel about that?
I almost wouldn't have a problem with that, because at least you're not lying to me, and you're not trying to sell me avatars or any other bullshit. Like, if you just said, this is a band, we're going to tribute the music of Kiss, and we're going to play Kiss's music, and we're going to honor the stage show, and we're going to get great players that can faithfully reproduce it, I'd be okay with that. It's as a Kiss fan, the thing that I always had a problem with is that they always just try to sell you on such bullshit. And I really felt like they were just, I was irritated that they tried to make it seem like Tommy Thayer was still Ace Frehley and that Eric Singer was still Peter Criss. I really felt like
they weren't.
Right. Yeah. And as somebody who, that music was very important to me and that band is very important to me, don't lie to me. And I never had a problem with other players. Like, I never had a problem with Eric Carr. I think Eric Carr is a phenomenal drummer. I loved the non-makeup era of the band, but like, don't try to fake it and say, well, and that's the thing when I come back to context. I don't mind zombie bands, but don't try to bullshit me, or don't try to tell me that this is just as good as what was out there. Because there's no way that you can tell me that Yes is just as good without Chris Squire or John Anderson. And there's no way that you could tell me, like, that's the problem I have.
Let me put this out there then. And this isn't really a zombie band per se, but Journey.
Yeah.
Okay. No one can match Steve Perry, but apparently someone can, right? They found Arnel Pineda, who can sing exactly like him. Who's young. He can hit all the notes, and they're fully, and they hired him, right? And they're fully behind him. And Arnel has been with the band longer than Steve Perry was, and they've recorded albums. So, and they're not trying to say, well, this is like Steve Perry. It's just that the guy sings just like him and has the same vocal range and power. So if the band is behind them, if the band is behind that guy, what problem should the audience have with it then?
The bigger problem I have with Journey right now is all the infighting and how
that comes with it.
But as far as Arnel, I thought that was cool, because Steve Perry, Steve Perry's living off his millions and he doesn't want to come back. That's fine. And Neil Schon never tried to fake it. He never faked it. It was very public when Steve Smith and Ross Valerie left the band, and they left the band for business reasons and that kind of stuff. It's just like I said, my biggest problem with the zombie band is when you put out an inferior product and you're faking it. Like, you're trying to make it seem like everything's cool and nothing's changed. That's when I get aggravated. That's really when I get annoyed. Like, and again,
the talent needs to back up what you're selling. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry. Do you think that the fact that they found a singer that sounds a lot like Steve Perry, is that the right move? I mean, you want somebody to hit. You want somebody to yes, hit the notes and make it. But
let me cut you off there, Eric. Then, because I have the perfect example for you.
Styx.
No. It's actually two entities. You had Queen plus Paul Rodgers.
Yeah.
And now you have Queen plus Adam Lambert. And Paul Rodgers cannot sing. He's not Freddie Mercury, but Adam Lambert can. But Queen is not they're not going out as Queen. They went out as Queen plus Paul Rodgers, Queen plus Adam Lambert. So we're saying we've got, and here's the nucleus of Queen, whatever's left, plus this person. And we're going to present the songs of Queen and preserve the legacy of Freddie Mercury, right? If that would be a hallowed ground to walk on, it would be Queen, right?
Yeah.
To not tread upon it.
Yeah.
So to your point, Eric, you're saying, well, do we want to get somebody that sounds like him? Well, they tried it with Paul Rodgers.
Didn't work.
Know how that went.
Yeah.
I think it worked.
Right? No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, but that's the thing. It's like, if they're upfront about it, as to Chris's point, then that's, perfectly fine. I mean, it's again, and I think about Styx too. Tommy Shaw and James Young, they have this stain. I mean, this real deep rooted like hatred for Dennis DeYoung at this point. If you hear like recent interviews with these guys, they're just awful, they didn't want anything to do with him. And Dennis DeYoung is kind of a mutual thing, I think. He kind of feels
warm. He's kind of like, yeah, guys, I his thing was always, let's give the fans what they want. Like, it's not about us; it's about them.
But again, because the thing is, these guys, okay, we didn't like what Dennis was doing. We didn't, whatever. We're sick of his bullshit, and yet they hire a guy that looks and sounds just like Dennis DeYoung. Right? I mean, the hair, everything. His keyboards,
the drama.
I get it, right? But I mean, I don't, but why? You know what I mean? Like, that's
Well, can't you just iron this out and have guys like
Yeah, that's right. It's a shame.
But to Chris's point, Neil Sean and Jonathan Cain don't talk to each other. They only talk to each other when they're on stage in Journey. Right? It's a business. They have like a business agreement. They do not get along. I don't even think they like each other anymore. But for the sake of Journey, and that's where Arnel Pineda is kind of in the middle, because he's like, well, this is my gig, but it's really dependent on whether or not these two guys can continue.
Yeah,
and he's made no bones about, keep going. And he's made no bones about his love and respect for Steve Perry, and like I feel like and that's the thing. Like I think there's like he knows why he's there, and he knows what he's doing, and he doesn't try to hide it. And the other thing about Journey too, I mean, let's be honest. After the first record, did Journey ever keep an original lineup? Like, I mean, if you go through every Journey record, there's some lineup change until you get to, I think, like Departure, and then that's where when you get to Escape, and then that's where the lineup stays a little stable, and then
that's where they became.
And that was only for 3 or 4 albums too. It's not like that they continued to record.
And then Raised on Radio, I think,
blows my mind too.
Yeah,
well, that's like Jonathan Cain was not an original member. I mean, he came much later, and the same thing goes for Styx. It's like Tommy Shaw. It's like how many albums did Dave make before he came on board?
I think it's like 4.
He's like, I am Styx at this point, and it's like Dennis DeYoung was a fucking founding member of that band, and I never understood how you could first fire someone from a band that you co-founded. You know what I mean? That blows my mind too. It's like it should be the other way around, but I guess
it depends on the partnership. It depends on the arrangement.
Guess so. The arrangement.
If they have a voting type of system, they can ask people to leave and say, "Yeah, we're voting you out. We don't really want you here anymore. No matter what I don't care if you've been here since day one."
Yeah,
if they have a democratic system of deciding.
I mean, how long has our Dragon been touring without an original member? Right. I mean,
well, they just announced that they're finished now. REO.
But even before that,
Bruce Hall and Kevin Cronin.
Kevin Cronin's not an original member, and Bruce Hall didn't come in until You Can't Tune a Piano.
Yeah. So there's not too many, and even another popular zombie band is Lynyrd Skynyrd.
That one I have a problem with.
There's not one original member.
But they've been doing it since what, the early 80s?
Well, they lost a bunch of members in the 70s, right? So they had the deck stacked against them and to figure out what they needed to do. But so is that, I mean, the brother Donnie Van Zant is kind of carrying. Is that the next best thing? Is if Johnny, is that the next best thing if it's a relative and he looks like his brother and he sounds like his brother? Is that good enough, Chris?
That one I have a problem with just because of like. It seems like they were just they try to like make it seem like they still have. Again, it's the thing. Like Ricky Medlock still tries to paint it like I was in the band. He played drums on a couple of demos in the early 70s, so he's not. I wouldn't qualify him as like a legacy member of the band and
full-fledged.
Yeah, right. And like slowly but surely. I mean, in 1987, you had everybody involved except for Ronnie and who's the one that had the accident and broke his neck? Alan Collins. And then slowly but surely, every member started to fade away. And I mean, let's be honest. Like, I don't know. I feel like they're trying to say that they're connected to the past, but are they really? I mean, yes, Johnny's been in the band for 30 years, and yes, he sounds like Ronnie Van Zant. But is anybody running out to buy the records that he sang on? Right. So like, I don't know. To me,
but that's not the point, right? I mean, like Eric said in the beginning, touring is where you're making your money. People are coming out to hear these songs again. And if we look at the proliferation of tribute bands for bands that are still active, right? There's 5 or 6 Fleetwood Mac tribute bands. There's a whole bunch of Eagle bands, Desperado and whatever they're called.
It's like 6 Genesis.
Yeah. So then if there's a, so let's say Foreigner is coming around to play the sanctioned Mick Jones authorized Foreigner, and they're going to play Radio City or whatever. And tickets are, $80. Would you rather go to Daryl's house in Pauling, New York and see the Foreigner cover band for $20?
Yes, I would.
Like what? Like my question is, where do the lines get blurred? Because my thought, a lot of people, obviously a big ELO fan, and my nephew would send me like, oh, there's an ELO tribute band playing, and my thought is, why am I going to go see a tribute band if the real band is still active?
Because sometimes, honestly, the tribute is better than the actual band. So, like, I'll give you for instance.
Okay.
In my 30s, I became a massive Grateful Dead fan. I don't know where it came from. I love the Grateful Dead. I absolutely love them. By the time I got around to being into the Dead, the thing that was out was they call it Dead and Company. It's John Mayer.
Yeah.
And when I saw them, it was 3 of the original 5 members of the band. And to their credit, they're not calling it the Grateful Dead. They didn't even call the last shows. They called it Fare Thee Well. They didn't actually call themselves the Grateful Dead. But if you go out and see them now, the one thing, and some of my Grateful Dead fan friends who hear this might give me crap later, but I would never go see Dead and Company because when they go out on stage, they play the Grateful Dead music at such a painfully slow tempo that it's to the point where it's actually not fun to listen to. I would look at it and go, I paid $100. I paid $125 to go see this, where I could go see Joe Russo's Almost Dead, whose tickets are still kind of expensive, but they play a tribute to the Dead that's fantastic. They're amazing live. Or like go see Dark Star Orchestra. They're a tribute band. They're 2 tribute bands that to me,
they've been around forever. Dark Star,
right? And to me, like although I've heard they've gotten better since Bill Kreutzmann's not playing with them anymore. To me, they play better and they play in a cooler venue. They're going to see Bob Ware and his assemblage of musicians at Citi Field. I'm going to see a better product at some place like the Cap, which is the Cap and Capitol Theater in Portchester, which is so much cooler of a venue to go see. And I'm not paying that ticket price, even though it might be slightly expensive to see J-Rad. It's still less than going to see Dead and Company.
Sure. Eric?
And that's another
Dead and Company. Well, who you're paying to see though with Dead and Company? I mean, you got Bob Weir, you got but John
Mayer. I mean,
John Mayer's involved. I think Bruce Hornsby was involved at one point. He was the keyboardist.
Jeff Chimenti is the keyboardist for Dead and Co.
Okay, but wasn't he like didn't he play like before maybe Dead and Company was even started. It was.
He played
I
with
know
the
he
Dead.
was involved
Yeah,
somehow. Like
he was
was
after Brent
he played with
Midland.
the
I
Dead
think
after Brent Midland died. He replaced. He came in and filled in sometimes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
it's
Burbridge
like the Allman Brothers, man, too. You got, Tedeschi Trucks. You got, they're doing essentially a lot of that stuff, Allman Brothers stuff. And then, when the Allman Brothers officially broke up after Greg Allman died, they played that tribute concert, that last show, and with no surviving member, I mean, except for Jimo. And I think he was it. I mean, Butch was gone and Greg was gone and all these people just at the same time. And they played that one, and they just called themselves. They called it. They were just known as the Brothers, and they played a fantastic. I mean, it was just a great performance. I mean, it's of that music and keeping that legacy open.
But
so that's where I feel like, okay, some of the original members, a lot of them are gone, but like we were just talking about, Chris. I mean, you don't want to hear them, playing at like half the speed at that they could be playing, or the intensity that you can get with younger players.
Or
and I think,
arrangements.
and I think art, and I think the audience wants that as well. They want the these bands of yesteryear and the tempo they heard it, and the that kind of thing. So yeah, sometimes maybe yeah.
All right, so let's flip this conversation on its head, because there is one recent maybe exception to the rule where there's only one person left in the band, but they did everything in the band, right? So I mean, let's throw Jeff Lynne's ELO out there, right? Where he's not touring as Electric Light Orchestra. He is separated that from, and by putting his name in front of it, so people know that this isn't a knockoff, because there were some, there was a group called The Orchestra, which had some former members that were kind of in ELO, and they toured. And in order for him to separate himself from that zombie band, he asserted the name and said, well, this is Jeff Lynne's ELO. So how important or not important is it to have all the other members of ELO with him when the one guy wrote everything and produced everything? Is this the exception to the rule where you don't need the other 90% of the band if you have the guy?
But to your point, even going back to when we did Out of the Blue, you told me, and I've heard you guys say it without me and out of my presence, how important Bev Bevan's drum sound was, and how important Kelly Graucut was as a bass player and a background vocalist.
Yes.
So is it really the same thing?
That's a good question, right? And that's why I bring it up.
Richard Tandy was when he first started playing these shows in recent years, Tandy was still there, though. He was still an original member. So his right-hand man, keyboardist. And, I don't know. I think for me, I mean, yes.
Let me put this to you, Eric, and maybe this will help you also. Because ELO was largely a faceless band, right? People didn't know in the 70s, really, it was just a bunch of guys with beards, really.
Yeah.
Right. So, is that important? It's not like the Beatles or Zeppelin or the Who, where everybody knew, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, they knew all the band members. Mm-hmm. So there would be something wrong if there was three of them and then some other guy,
No, I get you. But we did, though, right? As fans, we knew who they were. We got to know these people, these players intimately. We shed tears when Kelly died, and and Richard Tandy just recently, and so yeah. I mean, I feel they're, in my opinion, they're a part of that legacy. They're a part of that. It's not quite the same. For me, it's Jeff Lynne. I was grateful to have seen the man, the myth, the legend, and all the things he's done, and that doesn't diminish the absolute body of work that he's But as to go out on tour as ELO, I kind of miss the fact that, well, it's a shame that they couldn't reconcile sooner. That they couldn't, work out the differences. It would have been nice to have seen that band, that four-piece. But like, when they lay down, like we say, we cannot discount Kelly's bass lines and Bevan's drumming. Jeff Lynne can't play like Bevan. I mean, come on. I mean, it's just, he tries, but he does it to serve what he's doing, and to make it, but he's no Bevan. You know what I mean? So those are the kinds of things that, there is value to the players. And I feel like they are just as part of, they made that music what it was, much like the Who, much like, but because, some of these bands have bigger personalities, Keith Moon going on his, trashing rooms, and, he became a celebrity in his own right. And it had nothing to do with the music. It had everything to do with who the hell he was, right? Or, so each distinct, it depends on the personality, depends about, if you want to go there, you want to build yourself these massive egos that, that come into play. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they clash. And that's where the problems begin. It's like, oh, we have the right to do this. I mean, ELO Part 2, right? I mean, Bevan went out with Kelly. I mean, at one point, Kelly toured with him, right? I mean, that was towards the end, right? Yeah,
the violin player. Yeah.
So
they
Jeff Lynne's blessing to do that, though, didn't they?
Well, they made an agreement. Yeah, he said you can do that, because I'm not, at that point he was done with it. Now, Chris, let me ask you a question though.
Yeah.
As a parent, and Eric too, how important is it for you to be able to take your child to a Kiss concert, even if it's not the original four? If let's say 5 years down the road, they decided not to do the avatars and they went with the original plan, or how is the music more important? Is preserving the music more important, and still these bands giving their blessing and having the ability to continue the music, is that what's more important? Are we, I don't mean us in particular, but generally, are we getting too hung up on the people and not enough about people 5 years from now being able to go see a sanctioned version of Fleetwood Mac or a sanctioned version of the Who or whatever?
But again, to me, it comes back to, is it sanctioned, and is it, they're not?
And good.
Again,
let's say all those things were in place. So let's say they were sanctioned.
Then I absolutely would. Like if Kiss put out like a product where they said this is Kiss as a tribute to the music of Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, and the members of Kiss, and they come out and they do a full-on Kiss show, and it's a quality Kiss show, and it's not it's real live rock and roll, then that's fine with me. Like I said, it's just a lot of these zombie bands, I feel like they're trying to bullshit the public, and that's the problem that I have with a lot of these zombie bands. And when they do come around, they're not good. Like the only member of Dokken that's left, and again, this is an 80s band, is probably not as popular, but the only member of Dokken that's left is Don Dokken. And if you've ever watched video of Don Dokken on YouTube from the last 5 years, it is the most depressing and upsetting thing to watch, because he just cannot perform anymore. And that's the thing. Like, you're still going out and you're calling it Dokken, but like, it's almost like you're sullying the memory of that band. And I know he probably needs the cash, which makes it even sadder. But
exactly. And are you selling at that point? Are you selling the nostalgia? Right. I don't think he's trying to reach. I don't think Dokken is trying to reach new audiences at that point. Then, right? I think he's just trying to kind of get enough for retirement. Side note, right? Jeff Pilson is in Foreigner.
Foreigner, right? Yep.
Bass player for Dokken, right? So he's not even he's active, but he's not. He's in a different zombie band, oddly enough. Yeah. Yep. But I tend to be like, I want the original product. Like when I go see the Beach Boys, I want Brian Wilson and Mike Love and those guys.
Yeah.
But I think in talking about this, I'm guessing the artists just want to make sure that the music lives on, right? And in some cases, to Chris's point, so people got to make money. Like when Eric told the story about when he saw Ambrosia, and I'm like, you didn't see Ambrosia because it wasn't David Pack who's the lead singer. It was like Ambrosia Light or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if they were really good, and people didn't know that David Pack wasn't the vocalist, no harm, no foul, right? I mean, who's it hurting? I'm asking the question. Who does it hurt then?
Well, it doesn't. Like I said before, like it doesn't hurt. I don't think anybody today, because people just want to remember. People, they want to hear the music, and that's important. At the end of the day, it's really just about the music. And, you know, I don't know. Maybe it's the older I get, maybe the less hero worship I have for certain people.
To these things.
Yeah, because most of the people, like I mentioned this several times, and most of the people I like are bitter old men, or they're either dead or they're, you know, they're just curmudgeon, and they're just, you know, they're talking shit, and they're just, you know, they're not the people you think they were, or perhaps, you know, so that comes into play as well. I think sometimes you just say, you know, you just want to say, shut the fuck up and play the music. And, you know, but are they able to do that anymore as well? So, you know, I don't know. As long as you could, you know, if you're building a legacy, Jeff Lynne is a great example, because he still, I mean, the way I looked at when we saw them in Radio City, what I was thinking in that show was that he was a conductor. He was a conductor of this brilliant group of people behind him playing the music that he composed. It was almost like seeing like John Williams, like create, you know what I mean? Like you're going to change orchestras. You're going to change personnel through the years. That's how I kind of look at Jeff Lynne's ELO. He is standing there front and center, you know, a little bit apart from the rest of the crowd, from the band, you know, and just strumming away in his guitar. And if he had just been facing the band, which of course he can't do, that to me was what it was. It was Jeff Lynne, the maestro, playing his music, you know, with these brilliant people behind him that he put together. So, but it wasn't Electric Light Orchestra, the band that made that. You know what I mean? So,
well, and I think that's why, and I think that's where the exception comes in. Before I kick it over to you, Chris, is that he's taking pains to say this is Jeff Lynne's ELO. He's not trying to purport that this is the Electric Light Orchestra. He's saying, well, it's me. You know, because now, you know, it's time for me to assert that I was the main guy, and also to separate the product out from people that, you know, may think that they're seeing it. Well, if my name's not in front of it, it's not the genuine article, right? So I guess that's one way of, in a reverse thing, you know, Creedence Clearwater Revival, right? One of the you know, premier bands of the late 60s, early 70s. You know, John Fogerty left, but the other guys like, we got to make money. They didn't go out as Creedence Clearwater Revival. They went out as Creedence Clearwater Revisited. So they, you know, so they were like, we're not saying we're that, but we are the guys. We're two of the three guys, or two of the four that were there, you know, and we want to celebrate this music. So we're not going to try and hoodwink you to think it's CCR and that you're going to see John Fogerty, but we also want some name recognition, kind of like Dead and Company, or they used to call them the Other Ones or something like that also, or they're like a couple of.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, say what you want about the Dead and good, bad, or otherwise. When Jerry Garcia died, that name died. Like they went out as the Core Four, and they never called it the Core. They never called themselves the Grateful Dead. They called themselves the Dead. They called themselves the Other Ones. I think they went out as the 11 once. Like they never use that name again. That name died with Jerry Garcia, because he was like such an, I mean, he was the heart, and him and Bobby and Phil are like, you know, the heart of the band. That's where all the music comes from and stuff. So like, I really, as a fan, I think that's very cool. And like, still those other guys, they put out, I mean, to varying degrees of success, at least they were putting out like a decent product. And they still, I mean, I saw the one time I saw Dead and Company, they were at Citi Field, like, and they didn't use the name The Grateful Dead, or like, I like, you know, like you're saying that Jeff. So
does that make you feel better about it then, Chris? Does that make you feel like that the band is saying we're not what we were, and we're not going to tell you that we are, but here's what we're going to give you.
And on some level, it also says like, it's not so much the name, but if you put out a quality product, fans will find you. Like again, going back to my prog rockness, I've seen Steve Hackett, I think 4 or 5 times, and every time I've seen him, he's played in a fairly decent sized venue. And not that I think he can, because he probably doesn't own the rights, but he's never once tried to say it's Genesis. But he plays to like theaters filled with people that want to see that music played by quality players and one of the men who wrote it. And never once have I ever seen him to like an empty house. It's usually full or close to full. And I would rather go, I would rather go see that than go see what people saw when they saw the last time Genesis toured, because it's a quality product. It's a good band. It's good people. It's that music that I love so much. And he's not calling it Genesis. He's like Steve Hackett plays Genesis, plays The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway favorites, or Foxtrot at 50 or whatever it is. He'll say what he's playing, and it's his name. And never once has he tried to pass it off.
I've seen some of the clips, man, and I've never seen him personally in live, but I'd like to at this point, because
so good.
Some of that stuff. I mean, some of the singer he's got with him is amazing. The
Nad
musicians are right on point. And again, that's it's what you can do with that music.
But he's not purporting that he's Genesis either.
That's right.
Not at all.
Right? He's not. So it's really cool that there are bands that can get their shit together and say and honor the people who they worked with and love. There's that brotherhood. There's they get on each other's nerves. It's a family, and that they're no, we're not going to call ourselves the Grateful Dead. I love that. I love the fact that they can do that. That there are bands out there that do care for one another. That they honor. They're honoring that, which is why I have a problem with things like the Who, going out, and I don't think that Townsend, he, as much as he talks about Entwistle and Moon, especially Moon, he loved the guy, and it's like, but to go out and call themselves the Who, to me, I just don't find it appropriate.
What if those members before that said, "Hey, listen, if anything ever happened to me, I want you to carry."
Well, maybe they did.
Does that change? Does that change anything? Is that Chris? Does that mean any? Does that carry any weight?
That's allegedly.
The guy said, "You know what."
I mean, that's allegedly what happened with ZZ Top, right? Right, the bass player Dusty Hill died. Apparently, he gave his blessing to the new guy. What is his name? Elwood or whatever. Like that, he's playing with the band.
Yeah, he was his tech or whatever. His roadie. Right. Yeah.
And then
So
I guess we'll never know.
But if they're okay with it, why can't we be then? Right.
True,
right, but
that's true.
I'm just saying. I'm just asking.
But there are times where, like to Chris's point, where they're trying to sell it as something, and you could definitely tell it's more of a business decision versus a, how much of it is like, oh, well, we are like hard up for money, we need to do this and blah, blah, blah. And then it's just, and you can almost feel it in the music. And if you're not playing it the right way, if you're not delivering, much like I've seen some of those like performances by Fleetwood Mac with Mike Campbell, and I got to tell you, it just was not up to par, in my opinion. I mean, he's a brilliant player, and the other guy from Crowded House. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, but it just for them to have charged the money that they were charging for those tickets, no.
Absurd.
Now that to me is a different story,
Chris, you had something to say, right?
I was going to say, but at the same, and to Eric's point, like, I mean, let's be honest. You're going to tell me that if Daltrey and Townsend came out and said, Daltrey and Townsend play the music of the Who, that they're not going to sell out the Garden, or they're not going to sell the same number of tickets by just calling it the Who? Like, I'd feel much better about it. And I know this was probably absurd and childish, and just because they, I loved the Who growing up, but like, just to hear them say Daltrey and Townsend play the Who, like, to me, that to me is a lot more palatable, because at least like, it's not Entwistle. Nobody will ever be Entwistle, and nobody will ever be Moon. I don't care how many times if you're blessings from him.
Right, if you're a diehard Who fan, I would not have a problem Townsend and Daltrey.
Yeah,
just that, right? Just Townsend and Daltrey.
Yeah,
that's it. Know. I mean, you would know, and you would, You know what I mean? So, yeah. I mean, I just, I don't know. There are certain examples, and again, it's the bias that comes in. It's what we as fans are clinging to of the stuff that we grew up with, and I'm sure it's the same for new generations as well. Like,
well, I've got one more.
Mm-hmm.
Does Donald Fagen have the right to go out and tour now as Steely Dan?
Because
that's what he does, right?
That was a weird one too for me. I mean, I know he was mid.
I don't think so.
Was he mid tour when? I'm blanking on the other guy's name. Was he mid tour when that guy died? Yeah, I mean, I guess you have to finish the tour, but like again, can't you go out and
Walter
say Fagen?
Becker, I mean,
Walter Becker, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but then he stopped. Then after Walter Becker died, he did stop touring for a little bit, or toured as Donald Fagen, but then reemerged as all of a sudden you started seeing dates with Steely Dan.
Yeah,
but again,
I don't think that's right.
What's the difference between him and Jeff Lynne? Why does Jeff Lynne get to do it?
Because Walter Becker was
if he said Donald Fagen's, well, if he said Donald Fagen's Steely Dan, would that be okay?
Donald Fagen, Steely Dan, or Donald Fagen plays the music of Steely Dan. Like, but I mean, like Walter Becker, the difference between like again, if you're gonna get into that, like Walter Becker,
just playing devil's advocate.
But I get you. Yeah, no.
But he plays a much more essential role in what Steely Dan did. Than some of the other guys.
They formed that band together, and Donald Fagen never had a problem touring on his own, and people would flock to see Donald Fagen. They knew who he was. They, whatever. He was a regular. He never shied away from touring himself, making solo records and touring them. And so, yeah, I do think that there is a difference there because, without Walter, and Walter Becker really never got the recognition. I feel he was such an underrated man, other guy.
Yeah, he was the Art Garfunkel.
Exactly. But out of respect, I think, no, I don't think he should be calling it Steely Dan. Or,
and again, will he sell any less?
But if you're going
but if he's going to,
what was that, Chris?
Is he really going to sell? Like I said with the example of the Who, is he really going to sell any less tickets saying Donald Fagen plays the Dan? And at least
he might. I think he might. I think the name recognition of Steely Dan, because they still, as much as they're a classic band, I think there's a lot of people that don't know Donald Fagen, but say, "Oh, Steely Dan is not like a rock, like kind of." I think there is a little bit more name recognition if you see Steely Dan, Foreigner, and Journey on a bill, as opposed to Donald Fagen, Journey, and Foreigner on a bill. Like it kind of, and now we're talking about financial. At this point, we're talking about a financial decision, right? We're not talking about an ethical or moral decision. I think it's going to, like Eric said at the beginning, what name can they get on the marquee?
Yeah,
right.
And Chris said it. You said it, Chris. Yeah.
One of you two. I had a 50-50
well, here's another question. Okay, so in the case of somebody like Styx, for example, and I think Dean, we talked about this off the record. Would you rather see Dennis DeYoung with an unknown band, with a band that he put together playing Styx songs, or would you rather see Styx without Dennis DeYoung? So there's another.
I can answer the question for you because I've seen Dennis DeYoung twice.
Okay, well, the same thing's happening with Yes now with John Anderson. He just put together a new band. I think it's called the Band of Nerds or Geeks or something like that.
Band of Geeks.
Band of Geeks, and he's doing Yes music. He's performing.
That's fine, yeah.
He was
the voice. Like I guess lead singers get a pass, right? I think we kind of have to. I think we kind of have to acknowledge that if you're the voice of the band, you kind of have a different pathway, and I think you can get away with more, right? Because you can go out on tour like Dennis DeYoung did. His band, there was a guy that looked like Tommy Shaw. There was a guy that looked like James Young, and the guy that looked like James Young sang James Young songs, and he sang them really good. And the guy that looked like Tommy Shaw sang Tommy Shaw songs.
I don't get that. And they replace him with a guy that looks like Dennis. It just
did it to him. So
makes no sense.
I guess Chris, like John Anderson, you would go see him, right? Because he's the voice of all the Yes songs.
Well, here's what's interesting. I don't know if you guys know this. John Anderson went out, and I'm still kicking myself in the ass for not buying tickets for this. He went out with a band called ARW. It was Anderson, Raven, and
Raven and White and Wakeman. Yeah,
Wakeman.
Yeah, so you're combining
everything
members that have just crossed paths. Before you're talking about 80s Yes meets 70s Yes, and so many different configurations of that. And that was. I heard some of that stuff, and it's amazing.
It's phenomenal. It's a great live album. It's a great live album. It's called. But here's the interesting thing: Chris Squire dies. He changes the name to Yes. So they went out as Yes for a little while, and at the same time, you had the Steve Howe version of Yes, with fewer original members of fewer legacy members of Yes than ARW had, and they put out a live album. And after a while, I guess none of them really. I think Rick Wakeman especially, they didn't feel right about it, and that's why that fell apart, because they didn't think it was. It just, there was something like kind of icky about it, I guess, or whatever. But
icky about it,
that live album is fantastic. It's Anderson. It's Yes featuring Rabin, Wakeman, and Anderson. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I guess the bottom line as we wrap this up, I mean, I guess it's going to be, if you want to pay the money, if you want to say you saw Journey, if you want to say that you saw Fleetwood Mac, I guess that's one part of it, right? If you're looking to do bucket list items, say, well, I did go to Fleetwood Mac, because I guarantee the people that saw them with Peter Green probably said anything after this is a zombie, right? So all this stuff is also from a certain point of view. And then I guess another thing to consider for the people that are listening to think about this is it just about the music then, right? Do you just want to go and have a good time? And really, I don't care. I don't know who the guy is anyway, so I don't care that he wasn't the guy. Kelly Hansen has been in Foreigner probably longer than Lou Gramm, right? And he's pretty close, right? He's close enough. So at what point does that start to eclipse it, where those like bands like Journey and Foreigner they tour relentlessly for so many years that this guy has become the de facto lead singer on El Panetta or Kelly Hansen. Like, they've been doing it for so long, and that's all they do is tour, that people that go see them, that's what they know. Oh, that's the guy.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd say though is buyer beware. Like, if you're looking to go out and see these guys and you haven't already, like, and I'm not saying it so much as like, at least know get a sense of who's in the band in terms of like their ability to play. And know that you're not going to see, like, if you think you're going to see Journey and you think Steve Perry's in the band because you're not like a diehard, I mean, at least know, that's the one thing I would say is, like, at least find out what you're getting, and that you're getting a quality product, that you're not going to see a band expecting to see what they were, and then they're not much better than like a band playing like, the local dive bar. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, know what you're getting into and know what you're buying.
Yeah.
Another great example would be Earth, Wind, and Fire in Chicago. I mean, at this point, who's left in either one of those bands? And yet Chicago, I hear it's a fantastic show regardless.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, at least that's a decent show. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's one more, and we'll tie this up. I think 2 or 3 years ago, I saw the Alan Parsons Project. And Alan Parsons was there because it's his band, but Alan Parsons never sang any of the songs, right? So So I saw the Alan Parsons Project, and I saw Alan Parsons, and he was there, and he did everything, and he sang a couple of songs live because he needed to take them over, but he's not the voice of Eye in the Sky, and he's not the voice of Don't Answer Me, and he's not the voice of Time, right? But he's the name. His name is on the band, though. It's his band.
Yeah.
Right. So at some point, like if you know that Alan Parsons doesn't sing, and you're going to see Alan Parsons Project, he's going to be there, but you're already in for a replacement, right? Because Eric Wolfson passed away, or
Yeah. True.
So it's just interesting. So yeah, I think we'll leave it there. I think we've kind of opened up enough for people to think about, and we'd really like you to go ahead and hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. Let us know what you think. You can even message us within your podcast platform app. We can't answer, but you can certainly give us your feedback about it. And I think it's an interesting topic, especially if you go to a lot of concerts, or you thinking about it, or you're getting nervous that I better go see this band before this person is not around anymore, right? There's a lot of different things to consider, and I think we scratched the surface on quite a few. So I think that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Christopher Clark.
Thank you.
Another humdinger.
Yes, sir.
You're into the teens or 20s of episodes.
My wife keeps telling me I'm on a lot.
Well, we thank you for bringing this topic to our attention, and it's been a really good conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to link, like I said, we'll link the Rolling Stone article, so you can kind of read, and they go through a list of like the Drifters, and they go through Uriah Heep or whoever, Molly Hatchet. They go through a whole bunch of things, but it is a really interesting conversation, because as a lot of our favorite artists start to age out, either not necessarily passing away, but retiring. Someone's like, yeah, I've done it. I can't do it anymore. I guess we need to start thinking about that as the new reality. Do we want to go see sanctioned replacements, or do we want to find a really good tribute band for a lot less, that's hungry, that wants to get it done and does it for the love of it? So there's a lot to chew on, but that's going to do it for this episode. And for Chris and for Eric, who's on his comfy couch in parts unknown, and I'll be here on my green hard IKEA chair, we're going to ask you to please... No, we're not going to be kind of rewind. Brain fart. We will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.